Happy Friday night. I'm Jeffrey Daugherty, the Christian Whistleblower. And do you know who the first pope was? Do you know who the first pope was? Now, I know that you know what you've been told. I know that you know what you've been sold, but do you really know who the first pope was? We've already got, it looks like, a very enthusiastic crowd over into the YouTube chat room. Unfortunately, we've had to shut down the chat room for Twitter, Facebook, and Periscope because we got some dummies over there, and that's okay. But who was the first pope? I spent 20 years as a Protestant minister, about 100,000 hours of study in the scriptures, Bible college degree. So it's not something that I just started thinking about yesterday. I do have some experience. I do have some expertise. And we're here to talk about who was the first pope. Now, we're told the first pope was Peter, St. Peter. We're told that his body is buried in Rome. Unless I am mistaken, Peter's body is buried in the Vatican, right? Body of Peter. Body of Peter, St. Peter's tomb. Shall we take a gander at this together? Because this really does figure prominently. St. Peter's tomb is a site under St. Peter's Basilica. And of course, you know what St. Peter's Basilica is. Dun, 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 dun. This, of course, is St. Peter's Basilica. It's where you see the Pope always giving his audiences. We're looking from just in front of that great big obelisk that's out there in the middle of the courtyard. It's the de facto home base of the Catholic Church, obviously. And St. Peter's Basilica, ladies and gentlemen, is said to be the place of the tomb of St. Peter. It's supposed to be one of several graves in a structure said by the Vatican to have been built to memorialize the location of St. Peter's grave. How about that? Well, ladies and gentlemen, in order for St. Peter to have been the first pope, in order for St. Peter to have died in Rome, then he would have had to at some time been in Rome. And here's a picture of the floor above St. Peter's tomb. You can't actually go and see St. Peter's tomb, I don't believe. St. Peter's baldachin. St. Peter's tomb lies directly below this picture. So I guess for all intents and purposes, this is allegedly St. Peter's tomb. But guess what, ladies and gentlemen? What if I could tell you that St. Peter, what if I could show you that St. Peter was never even in Rome? And better yet, what if I could show you Catholic people saying that St. Peter was never in Rome? Would that impress you? Well, be prepared to be impressed. Here we are. We're looking at a simple search. Was Peter in Rome? Catholic Answers, https://www.catholic.com. www.catholic.com. Can you get any more of an authoritative reference than Catholic.com? Allow me to read this for you. Allow me to highlight this for you. There is, in fact, no New Testament evidence, nor any historical proof of any kind that Peter was ever in Rome. All rests on legend. Admittedly, the Bible nowhere says that Peter was ever in Rome. Let me repeat that for you. There is, according to Catholic.com, there is, in fact, no New Testament evidence nor any historical proof of any time. I'm quoting from Catholic.com. There's no New Testament evidence nor any historical proof of any kind that Peter was ever in Rome. Does that surprise you? Peter was never in Rome, but they want us to believe that Peter was the first pope. Peter was never in Rome. That's not Peter's grave under St. Peter's Basilica, and St. Peter was never at the place where St. Peter's Basilica is, ever. Never. Not there. Period. How do you deal with that? How is it possible? The Catholic Church tells you that Peter was the first pope, and they admit that the man was never even in Rome. But I don't get it. And they tell you with a straight face, Peter was the first pope. Peter was never in Rome. And you know what? From their perspective, they're telling you the truth. Because Peter was the first pope. But Peter was never in Rome. The first pope was named Peter, but Peter was never in Rome. To the North says, does he have to have been there to be a pope? Well, yeah. Let's go back to our quote from Catholic.com. Let's go back to our quote from Catholic.com. There's no New Testament evidence or any historical proof of any kind that Peter was ever in Rome. It all rests on legends. Paul's journey to Rome is recorded in great detail. Are you picking up what they're putting down? Peter was never in Rome, admits the Catholic Church. Paul, his journey to the city is recorded in great detail. And in fact, ladies and gentlemen, the historicist, the history writer Josephus, who has his issues, but you say Josephus puts Paul in Rome as late as 67 AD as a valet to the emperor. Why do we borrow from Peter to pay Paul? Well, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know how much you know about Catholicism. I don't know how much you know about popes. I don't know how much you know about what goes on. But if you recall, the Pope changes his name when he gets elected. The Pope changes his name when he gets elected. So Paul, who was hand-selected by Nero, who Nero worked with to create the Catholic Church, the church opposing the teachings of the Christ, Paul, of course, became the first pope. He also became the first to change his name when he became pope. And if you know anything about the scriptures, Peter opposed Paul, Paul opposed Peter. They had almost a physical altercation, except Paul held himself back because he knew he would have killed him. I don't know if you know it, but Paul was a misshapen, probably hunchback, possibly a dwarf, and Peter was a big, strong fisherman. So it is not Peter buried in St. Peter's Basilica. It's the twisted, dwarfish form of Saul of Tarsus buried under St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. Because it was Paul, along with Nero, that created Christianity, both its Roman Catholic and its Roman Protestant iterations. And it was Paul who, upon being named first pope, inflicted his last great injustice to the name of the beloved Apostle Peter, the last great slap that he could give to a man that gave his life for his faith, why Paul turned and ran and left all of his friends, all of his neighbors, all of his compatriots to die in the conflagration that was to come upon Jerusalem in AD 70. He knew it was coming. That's why he left. Paul, upon becoming first pope, said, "Call me Peter." Paul was the first pope, and he changed his name to Peter. Peter was the first pope. Peter never went to Rome, but Paul went to Rome. Paul became the first pope, and Paul changed his name to Peter. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the truth. That's exactly what happened. And now you know. Feel free to share with your Catholic friends. Feel free to share with your Protestant friends. And the next time somebody asks you, who was the first pope? Now you'll know. In the information box below is a link to my first book. It was called Apostle Paul Antichrist. It has the whole story in a historical novel form. The foreword is by George Norrie. I think you'll enjoy it. Peter was not the first pope. Paul was. And now you folks know the whole story. You folks know the whole story now of why Peter was not the first pope. Paul was. I hope that it made some sense to you. I hope that it resonated with you. And I hope that maybe it gives you something to think about here on your Friday night. Peter was not the first pope. Paul was. I'm Jeffrey Daugherty, the Christian Whistleblower, doing all I can to help you unindoctrinate yourself.